Judge Hankinson, there is no amount of prison time that will bring Mike back to me. I am asking you to lock Denise Williams Winchester up for the rest of her life with no chance of parole. She has already lived 18 years longer than my son.
Hey you and welcome. My name is Mike and today we're going to talk about Jerry Mike Williams. Poor guy. Eaten by alligators. Wait. In the year 2000, Mike Williams went duck hunting in Lake Seminole. He never returned, and it was presumed he drowned, and then the gators chowed down. But Mike's wife Denise, maybe she was having an affair. Maybe she was having an affair with Brian Winchester, Mike's best friend. And maybe a big ol' life insurance policy was taken out on Mike not too long before he disappeared. By maybe, I mean, yes. This case, it unfolded over 19 years, until 2019, when justice was finally served. Let's hit the bricks. Mike Williams grew up north of Tallahassee, and he excelled in school. He began his hobby of duck hunting during his teenage years, during which time he met Denise Merrill and also Brian Winchester. At school, he was known to be well-liked, protective, and a genuine person. After school, he attended Florida State University, studying political science and urban planning, and was soon snapped up as a property appraiser. Mike married Denise in 1994, and pretty soon he was earning the big bucks, about $200,000 a year. He was a hard worker and it was paying off big style. Mike became a devoted father in 1999, and let me tell you, as someone who doesn't have kids, I'm sure it makes you think about your own mortality. You see, Mike's dad, he died not long after his daughter was born, and so Mike, contemplating his inevitable death, him and his wife took out several life insurance policies, totaling $1.75 million. They did this through friend Brian Winchester, who they had known since their high school days, and Brian, he was a close and trusted friend, though maybe a little too close. Know what I'm saying? On the morning of December 16th, 2000, 31-year-old Mike woke up bright and early, in the mood to blow the shit out of some quackers. He drove off, boat in tow, to Lake Seminole. He wasn't planning on staying long. In fact, Mike and Denise were planning on celebrating their 6th wedding anniversary that night. And so, by the time midday rolled around, Mike hadn't returned. Which was odd, he was only going to be gone a few hours that morning. Denise then called her dad to tell him, and then Brian Winchester and her father drove to the areas of the lake where they knew Mike usually went duck hunting. They found his car, but nothing else. No sign of him. They called the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and a search began, but soon had to be called off after a storm approached. The search focused on the area around where his car was found, but zip. They did find his boat about 200 feet away, and his shotgun was still inside, still in its case in fact, but no Mike. And so, theories began to emerge with no body. The area his boat was found in, well, there were a lot of stumps above and beneath the water, and so they began to ponder. Maybe his boat, it had hit a stump, and Mike fell off the side. When his waders filled with water, he could have drowned. But, they still had no body, so it was hard to come up with a definitive conclusion. But it seemed that it was a tragic boating accident. And the search was called off 2 months later. And so, as the search winded down, a private search team was hired by Cheryl, Mike Williams' mother. They noted that during the search, many a gator were seen, and so they put 2 and 2 together. He most likely drowned, perhaps became entangled in the hydrilla beneath the surface, and was eaten. 6 months after Mike disappeared, a fisherman at Lake Seminole found a pair of waders floating in the lake, and divers that were called to search the area found a lightweight hunting jacket and a flashlight. In one of the jacket pockets, there was a hunting license with Mike's name and signature. However, strangely enough, there were no teeth marks or any other damage on the waders, and nothing found showed signs of having been in the water for that long. Or at the very least, it definitely wasn't there for 6 months. Weird, but I don't know. Who knows how water works? A week later, Mike was legally declared dead. Now, who knows if Mike had, future-telling abilities, whatever. Because it was pretty lucky he had, taken out that life insurance policy not long before he vanished, or disappeared, or was eaten. His family would want for nothing. Denise, she received a $1.5 million payout. And, luckily, she had a shoulder to cry on. Brian Winchester, the man who had sold them the life insurance policy. Brian, he divorced his wife and married Denise. And Brian and Denise, they lived happily ever after. Thank you so much for watching. I really am kidding. There's so much more to go through. See, Cheryl Williams, Mike's mom. She didn't buy it. The drowning, she called bullshit. She attempted to have the police reopen the investigation. No dice. When not working, she would investigate on her own, digging in, and because of her, the truth would be revealed. 4 years after Mike's disappearance, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, lobbied by Cheryl, reopened the investigation. She basically gave them 4 pertinent pieces of information. The boat launch where his car was found. It wasn't the one he normally used. The storm that arrived when he had first been reported missing. If the boat was on the lake when he fell off, which was the prevalent theory, it should have blown to the other side of the lake, not the one it was found at. When the boat was discovered, its engine was off, and the gas tank was full. If the engine had been running when Mike fell off, the boat would have remained on, running in circles until the fuel ran out. Mike also didn't usually hunt alone. Investigators also learned that alligators don't eat during the winter, so his body should have been found. The waders also, they just didn't make sense as to why they would be found where they'd been found with no body. They also didn't look like they'd been in the water 6 months with, no lake shit on them. They weren't destroyed after being in water for ages. Also, Mike wasn't an idiot. He knew that you can drown wearing waders in the water if they fill up and weigh you down, and so he never would have worn them on the boat. Mike's death, it became quite suspicious, but they had nothing to go on. The original scene hadn't been treated as a crime scene, so they had no evidence. But those points combined with that old life insurance policy became food for thought. However, the investigation was closed in 2008. Cheryl never gave up, constantly writing and calling to keep pressure on to investigate her son's disappearance. But after a while, the authorities stopped answering her calls. And that happy marriage, not too happy. 2012, Brian and Denise, they separated. Apparently Brian, he was a bit of a fiend for the sex. Bit too much. And they would divorce in 2015. He was against the divorce, but had been ordered to, go along with it. Then, about a year later in 2016, Denise was driving to work one day when someone climbed over the back seat of her car with a gun in their hand. It was Brian. He began screaming at her, saying he didn't want a divorce and, that she had stopped answering his calls and his texts. He said he was gonna blow his own head off. But Denise eventually managed to calm him down and she drove him to his own car. Funnily enough, even though he'd kind of threatened suicide, when getting out of Denise's car, he also took his things with him, which included a plastic sheet, a bleach bottle, and some tools.
I have to have my tools!
He apologized for what he had done, and she said, "Alright, fine, we'll leave it at that. I'm not going to tell the police." She lied.
I was calling my sister, and this person starts climbing out of the very back, and I couldn't tell at first who it was, but then immediately I knew who it was, but I was screaming, and the phone helped me. I didn't know if she had picked up yet or not, and then he grabbed the phone, so I don't know if he turned it off. I don't know how. I never saw the phone again. He, was up and grabbing me, and he pulled my face pretty hard, and he goes, he's cussing, and he pulled out a gun, like a gun, not a hunting gun, but like a gun he would kill someone with, and he put it right here in my ribs. So like I'm driving, and he's right here, and he kept saying, "I just want to talk to you, I just want to talk to you," because he's been emailing me texting me. I blocked him off everything, trying to get me to stop the divorce. So then he was like, I had to do this because you won't answer my texts or my calls. Please just call the divorce off. I've lost everything, blah, blah, blah. And then as we were talking, I was just kind of agreeing with whatever he was saying. And I was like, I know that you love me. And he's recently lost his son. His son has decided to move in with, he had joint custody and now he doesn't. And so he said, I've lost my son, I've lost you, I have nothing to live for. And I was like, you could get us all back if you'll just turn your life around, because he was a Christian at one point. And I was like, if you'll just turn back to the Lord. So the whole time I'm turned this way, I'm buckled in, but he's calm, he's calming down. And so, but the gun's still right there, and I'm just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And he's like, what am I doing? I could tell he was, and I was like, I don't know, I know you want to talk to me, but this is not the way to do it. I know, what have I done? And it's like he kind of woke up, like, what have I done? What have I done?
Shortly after, Brian went to lunch with a friend, reportedly telling his friend the police were after him and kept contacting him, and that his wife was going to say something about this guy who died 10 or 12 or 15 years ago. Who was he talking about, do you think? Brian was arrested and charged with kidnapping, domestic assault, and armed burglary. Cheryl Williams, she was very curious when Brian was arrested, as she was like, well, they've been suspicious from the very get-go. Maybe this will unravel something. In December 2017, Brian was sentenced to 20 years in prison for the kidnapping. Coincidentally, the day after Brian was sentenced, the police announced they had finally found old Mike's body. Would you look at that? It was determined he had been murdered. His body was found at the end of a road about 60 miles from Lake Seminole. On May 8, 2018, Denise Williams was arrested as she left work to celebrate her daughter's 19th birthday, after a grand jury had indicted her on charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and accessory after the fact.
Sex, lies, and deceit for 21 years. That is how prosecutors summed up their opening statement in a nationally watched trial in Tallahassee. 48-year-old Denise Williams faces life in prison for her former husband's murder and an 18-year-long cover-up.
See, Denise began conspiring with Brian to murder Mike since March 2000, 9 months before he went missing. Brian had shot Mike and dumped his body. As the years went by, Denise continually covered for Brian, and they had avoided any charges. Until now. Denise pled innocent. During the trial, it all came out. Denise and Brian had been having an affair for years behind Mike's back before he went missing. They then began to consider killing Mike so they could marry. Divorce, that was never an option, as Denise was reportedly image-obsessed and concerned about losing custody of her daughter. And sure, you know yourself, they thought they may as well make a few bob, make a bit of money while they're at it. Life insurance, baby. And Brian, he was granted immunity if he said exactly what happened to Mike. On the day Mike disappeared, Brian lured him to Lake Seminole. Out on the water, he had gotten Mike to put his waders on, then pushed him out of the boat, thinking he would drown. But instead he managed to get to a tree stump, so Brian fired a single shotgun blast to his face. Since the boating accident was now off the cards due to the shotgun blast to the face, Brian buried the body at a different spot. The kidnapping of Denise, which is what led to him being arrested in the first place, was because he was scared that due to them divorcing, he thought Denise might let something slip.
Denise, because of the way she was raised, because of her pride, I guess I can't say all the reasons, but she did not want to get divorced, but she still had a desire for us to be together, which narrowed the options. Another scenario that we came up with was Mike and I going on a hunting trip together, and there being an accident where both he and I ended up in the water, and he drowned and I did not. I had told him that we were going to go to a secret special spot to go hunting, and that he needed to bring his waders. I had to make sure that he brought his waders because the belief was, there was kind of like there still is probably like a duck hunter's myth that if you fall overboard with your waders, you're going to sink really quick and drown. We got to that area that I knew was a deep area, basically stopped the boat and got him to stand up, and when he did, I pushed him into the water. I don't know if he was trying to swim or I didn't know what was going on, but what I came to find out or eventually realized was he was taking the waders and the jacket off. And he was panicking, and I was panicking, and none of this was like going how I thought it was gonna go. So I loaded my gun, and I made 1 or 2 circles around, and I ended up circling closer towards him, and he was in the water, and as I passed by, I shot him.
Was there a plan for you to gain access to or a portion of the insurance funds individually?
No, sir. All of Denise was a beneficiary, the only beneficiary in all the policies, as well as all their personal assets, as well as the Social Security. I mean, in total, it was about $2.25 million that she stood to receive in total. I was not the beneficiary on any of it, but of course, we knew that eventually when we ended up together, that I would secondhand benefit, I guess you could say.
After 8 hours of deliberations, the jury convicted Denise on all charges. In February 2019, 48-year-old Denise was sentenced to life in prison, as well as an additional 30 years for the conspiracy charge. There is no possibility for parole.
When I went to the lake, God told me Mike was not in Lake Seminole. He didn't drown. He didn't get eaten by alligators. I had to find him and bring him home. I begged Fish and Game to do a criminal investigation. They told me Mike drowned and got eaten by alligators, and there was no need for an investigation. They laughed at me and called me crazy. Fish and Game and FDLE should have known that alligators are ectothermic. They don't eat in cold water. Instead of investigating, they chose to ridicule and call me crazy and tell me that I didn't do things the right way. There is no manual to tell a mother what to do when her child goes missing. I just did what God put on my heart to do. For the rest of my life, when I try to sleep at night, I will see my son clinging to a tree stump in Lake Seminole in the dark, knowing that his best friend is trying to kill him. I hear his voice screaming for help. I wasn't there to help him. It will haunt me forever.
Based upon the jury verdict in this case, Ms. Williams, I do adjudicate you guilty of counts 1 and 2. On count 1, I sentence you to 30 years Department of Corrections. On count 2, I sentence you to life in prison.
Brian, he received full immunity for testifying against her and will be released after serving his 20-year sentence for kidnapping. And that's the story of that one. It took 18 years for the truth to come out, and it ends up being the plot of a movie. Like, what the hell? But in these cases, fact is nearly always stranger than fiction. And there you have it. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to watch some more of my videos, please work away. And I have a Patreon as well, with I put videos up there early. There's some exclusive videos, ask me anything, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to check it out, support me and the channel, that'd be awesome. I will see you, as always, real soon in the next video. Take care of yourselves. Mike out.